Hey guys, welcome to my detailing demo. Today I'm going to be painting one of my extraterrestrial dwarves, and it's a character from my book. But first, I'm going to show you a lot of things today. I want you to see how I trace the line work of my character's beard so that I can retrace it after I'm done painting the dark background. This saves a lot of time because I can just go in there with paint after tracing this and cover everything that I'm tracing right now. As you see here, I've covered all that, and I'm just making a little more of a gradient with a sepia. And I'm using Acryla-gouache. And in between coats of the watery Acryla-gouache sepia, I'm just using a little heat gun to dry things. But also, as you can see, I didn't have to noodle my way around the little beard hairs. After tracing them, I just came in with the paint and painted all over the place very quickly. It cuts the time down in half. Later in the demo, you'll see that I'm going to take that piece of tracing paper and trace back in what I had before, the little beard textures and scrolls, and then paint over them. So here's me sort of feathering out and smoothing out that nice transition and working in between all the little imperfections just to sort of transition that dark outer space background into the ground plane, which in this painting is craters and mushrooms and things. So I traced the other side of that original tracing of the beard so that I could just transfer the beard back onto the painting. And that's what you're seeing here. This is the transfer phase. So now it's going to be a lot easier for me to see the shininess of the graphite when I'm going in and painting the white of the beard and the light of the beard. And I've sped things up a little bit because some of these steps take a little bit of time. And the camera got a little shaky there. So now I'm adding in a little bit of raw umber. And bear in mind, this entire demo is just a little bit of pencil for the beard, and the paint is all Acryla-gouache, Holbein brand. I'll show you some tube examples in a bit. So I'm just laying down a watery Acryla-gouache. The thing I like about Acryla-gouache is that you can use it like watercolor. In many of my paintings, here's some of those Acryla-gouaches. I'm just showing you that I'm using jet black and raw umber. The great thing about Acryla-gouache is that you can combine it with all sorts of things. So, for instance, I'll paint almost my entire underpainting with watercolor. And then I'll add in the opaques with the Acryla-gouache because it doesn't come up and it looks just like watercolor when you water it down. But that's the best part about it. It's very versatile. I can make it look even like my oil paintings. And this character is based on part of an oil painting that I finished for the second book. So when I was comparing the two looked very similar. Here I'm just painting the arm with that combination of jet black and raw umber. The reason why I added a jet black to that brown is because it sort of cools it down. Of course it darkens it, but it just gives me that darker, different, cooler tone of brown that I needed to paint another part of the character. In this case, the sleeve and the shirt. And here I'm just feathering the edges of certain folds and things so that I can make some nice transitions, just dabbing in some fairly wet applications of paint. and just, darkening and dabbing and letting things dry. And when they take too long to dry, bring the heat gun back in and heat it up. And I'm going to try to finish this entire character because it is a detailing demo. So I want to show you how I approach almost every single little detail. Obviously, as you know, no piece is ever finished. But this is going to be one of my most finished pieces for a demo. Me being a perfectionist, it's kind of hard for me to love every piece I do and to consider everything finished, but you'll see by the end of the demo what it looks like. Here I'm just darkening up the shoes and let them dry so I can later go over them with this burnt umber color. It's just a little more opaque than the bag because I want the outfit to be a little consistent. I want there to be a little color harmony between the two neutrals of different opacities. But I want there to be a series of different browns because these characters still need to feel sort of like dwarves even though they're from another milieu or another world. And they have a completely different origin story. So being a dwarf, this character is going to have a lot of those nice earthy tones, warm browns. And that's why here I'm just darkening up the sack, getting it ready for another coat of gray, which I'll add later, which will make it a little more dusty looking. And here I'm painting the little furs that run around the character's body beneath his belt. And that's just a little bit of yellow ochre. So I'm going to take these three, the neutral gray, number 2, a little bit of the raw umber, and some olive green. And this is what I'll use to paint the base coat of the face. I want the face to be a little green, but I want the color of the face to sort of reflect the other colors in the character. Again, for color harmony. So I gotta darken that fist to make it look like it's further back and below the top fist, which is catching more light. And I'm darkening the cheeks, the nostrils, the nose, the forehead, the side of his head. The side of his nose next to his cilium. And setting it up for highlights and other colors to come. So now I'm going to add a little gray, like I was saying, to the sack so that it looks more dusty. I mean, this is a sack that's carrying moonflesh, which is an ore or a mineral in my story that the characters use to make weapons and armor and things. So I want it to feel very dusty. And when that dries, I'll darken up the edges a little bit to make the form seem more sculptural, more three-dimensional, the form of the bag or the sack. And here I'm adding a little more dark to the face to make it a little more three-dimensional, to bring out those little wrinkles and laugh lines, crow's feet, nose warts, and such. I'm also painting the base coat of the hair, even though the hair is going to be very, very white. And these are the terrestrial equivalents of my white dwarf stars, which are the wisest stars in the galaxy. Sorry, the universe, rather. So they're the earth-dwelling or terrestrial descendants of those star characters. Now I'm just drying all the little parts I painted, getting ready for the final steps, darkening up the sack a little bit after putting a little more gray on it. And then I'm painting just a sort of light base coat for the pickaxe. I really want to bring out the pickaxe values. So I wanted to reiterate that, because in a bit I'm going to start painting the pickaxe and adding a full range of values so that it looks really, really, really shiny. I'm mostly going to put the highlights and the glare toward the center of the pickaxe. So I wanted to just show you that again before I move into the next part of the video, and before I switch brushes and start mixing some other paints. But I made sure that I darkened the edges of those little puffs of fur at the sleeves and at the cuffs of the boots, so that eventually they seem softer, more fluffy. So here we have the darks that go into the backpack, or the sack, or the bag of moonflesh chunks. And what I'm doing is just putting some darks down, drying them with my heat gun, and then transitioning those dark values into the rest of the bag so that the bag looks like it's full of things, like it's, filled almost to the brim, and that this character is shouldering a pretty heavy load of ore. So it depends on the kind of paper you're using. Sometimes you have to go back in there and just touch things up, like I'm doing here. This is a Canson Infinity Arches watercolor printable paper. It comes in a box of pre-cut sheets that are formatted for Canson printers. So it's a little sensitive. And that's what I used to paint the original piece when I painted this, entire piece for Book 2. And now I mostly use Fabriano soft press watercolor paper. So here's some Chinese white and ash yellow. And I'm painting the nose a little bit. I've zoomed in so you can see a little bit of the detail on the nose and the nostrils. I'm painting some of the little sacs underneath his eyes and the cheeks, but I don't want them to be too dark, nor do I want them to be too light. I want them to be sort of somewhere between, like a mid-tone. And notice how I hold my paint on my palette knife while I'm painting. This way I don't have to reach too much back and forth, back and forth. So I've zoomed out so you can see what I'm doing here, which is basically the start of painting the hair that I transferred earlier in the video. I'm just really, really carefully taking a tiny bit of paint and making sure my strokes aren't bubbling up or going down too hard. I'm resting my hand I'm resting my hand on the edge of the canvas, which in my case is MDF board with that Arches printable paper mounted to it, just so that I have more stability. So I don't want these either to feel overwrought or too heavy-handed. Now I'm getting to the hair, and I specifically left this till the end, left the hair painting and beard painting phase to the end, because I knew that I was going to cover a lot of the hair and make several washes over the sack or the bag while I was building up the underpainting and all of those preliminary steps. So now that all of that is done, I can still do a little bit to the bag, to the bottom of the bag, but I can paint with confidence over those little drawn-in strands of hair. So this is just a mixture of that, again, that little tiny bit of ash yellow and a ton of that Chinese white, because Acryla-gouache Chinese white is not as strong as titanium white, which is usually my go-to white. It's not as opaque. It feels a little more watery. But it's good for a job like this, because by the end of most of my strokes, I want the paint to go down a little thin. And since the Chinese white is thin to begin with, or thinned out, it's not as potent as the titanium white, it's going to do that for me. So I know at the end of some of my strokes, I'm going to have even more of that transitional stroke or that feathered stroke as I'm working. It's a very efficient way to work with that specific Holbein paint. Now here I am, just highlighting the brow a little bit, giving him some white eyebrow hair. And now I've finally gotten to the pickaxe. So I put in a little gray at the edges and other side. And now I'm adding some highlights with the same color I used for the hair and beard to the top of the pickaxe, on both sides. My hand's in the way, sorry. And then I'm putting a little bit in the middle. So I added a little bit of water from my cup to that. Sometimes I have it on my palette knife, right there on the bottom left, so that I can just blend in those light values, that shine, into the rest of the pickaxe. And now I'm adding a little bit of that darkish sepia brown, so that I get a nice wide range of values in that pickaxe, and so that it can begin to look like metal. But, something like rusted metal, corroded metal, something that's been used thoroughly and not repaired in a while or sharpened. And now I'm adding a little bit of that straight Chinese white to the middle to bring out my final highlight. And I'm going to add a little bit of that to the top on the right side and the little top notch or pin of the pickaxe. And this is one of my final touches, my final details. It's a little tricky, especially working at this scale. But you really want that full range of values on a piece of metal, or a metallic object for that matter. And now I'm just putting in a couple of little scuff marks and pits and things that catch the light. I'm going to take that same color and add a little bit more to the brow, the nose, and the head in little stipples and strokes so that the character looks a little sweaty. You know, the character's been working in the mines of this moon. So I want that to show through. And I want his little eyebrow hairs to really, really pop out. Because these characters, you know, most of them are hundreds and hundreds of years old. Now I'm just darkening the feet and the shoes with a little bit of a jet black and raw umber mixture. And trying to keep it consistent after adding a really strong opaque line to the bottom of each shoe before doing this. And notice how some of my line work still shows through. You can see it on my hands. You can see my pencil work on the bag, little crater-like shapes there. And you can even see some of it in the face. So now I'm just darkening up his little pouch there, his belly, where you see some stitch marks. And that's it. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.